Welcome to a new episode in our series Free Will in Astrology, and I welcome the astrologer Joseph Crane from America. And we had a start before and we got technical problems, so let's start again. We want to start it this time with the great question. People speak about planets' influence, and that is a loaded term because influence can be causal or it can be acausal. In the old philosophies of in the Hellenistic area, both approaches were there. Some people said, like Ptolemy, there is a direct causal effect, and other people like Proclus said, no causal effect. This is all sign.
Right.
And if you go with Proclus, then you have the problem. Okay, if it's a sign, what is it a sign for? Because that he doesn't really tell you. Okay, how do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to agree that it's not causal in the sense of efficient causation. You had mentioned earlier looking at the Plotinus piece, Are the Stars Causes, where Plotinus does a really good job making fun of this kind of direct causation. That how could a Mercury in Sagittarius be unhappy and a Mars in Capricorn be happy? But your question of influence is important because we do use that language. And we could talk about influence etymologically in terms of a flow. I think both in German and in English, the word has to do with sort of not some kind of mechanism, but almost like the universe being like a river. And we're within a flow that includes the stars and planets, that includes our daily life. So I would think of that symbolically. For practical reasons, though, I recently had my last client has Uranus square Venus, okay? Uranus by transit square Venus. I'm sorry, not square, it's a conjunction. And yes, she's looking for romance. And yes, there's a sudden quality or she wants something like quickly, even though her Venus is in Taurus. So is Uranus influencing Venus? Well, you could say that. You could also say that my job as astrologer is to look at that configuration in the context of this woman's life. What if she had been married for 30 years and is totally happy in her situation? Yes.
Let me ask you, if it's not causal, but a sign, and the way you were just talking, Venus and Uranus.
Yes.
So you don't mean that the planet Venus or the planet Uranus is doing anything, because those are only signs for something else. And if it's a sign for something else, we are talking about working mechanisms which are not the planet, but something else.
We're talking meaning mechanisms.
Meaning mechanism is just a word. In your book, in this one, which we are talking later, when we are talking about the Divina Commedia, Divina Comedy of Dante, and there is a German competitor with yours writing this book about astrology and Dante.
Who wrote it? Is that about Dante?
Yes, this I can take the computer and can show all the viewers what I'm talking about. This is a German author, an astrosoph author. He has written books about Astrosophia.
Okay.
And this is the wrong.
Tarnas. Whoop.
I'm on the wrong subpage. This is Richard Tarnas coming on tomorrow. There we go. This is Joseph Crane. This is the book we will be talking later.
Yes.
And
What do you have?
And here's the book by Arthur Schult.
Fun.
It's Dante's Divina Commedia as an evidence for a Temple Knight's esoteric background. And he says in this book that when you are in Paradiso and you are on the crystal sphere, there the angel groups are located, and he says, okay, the seraphim are responsible for the crystal sphere. The cherubim are responsible for the fixed star sphere. The thrones are responsible for Saturn.
Yes.
And then he goes down, and then he comes down to Venus and Moon, and the archangeli are Mercury.
Archangels.
And so when I take off this screen, so when we are talking about Venus and Uranus in your example, in the Dante philosophy, in his Divine Comedy, we are not talking about Uranus, because that's not in the 12th, 13th, 14th century. We are talking about the 7 original planets. And then we have Venus. It goes from Moon, angels, Mercury, archangels. We are talking about archai. And those are the entities organizing the Venus's aspects. So would you agree on that we have spiritual angel sort of hierarchies doing the work, which we shorten to Venus does this and that?
It's a very attractive idea in terms of how astrologers talk about planets. I think of them more internally, that Venus has a character. Venus has a personality.
So when you say Venus, what do you mean?
Okay. What I mean is, I actually mean almost like a character in a novel. Let's use that as an example.
Okay.
Okay, a character in a novel has different dimensions, a different growth. And, Venus is not Aphrodite only, although Aphrodite is a manifestation of Venus. Venus is also Johann Sebastian Bach. Venus is also Marquis de Sade, James Joyce. Venus is that power of attraction that merges.
When you say that, do you mean it in the sense that it's a character inside the client? Or is it an entity, a spiritual entity from outside the client, manipulating the client?
I do not make that distinction.
Oh, okay.
I do not make that distinction. Astrology does not conform to our standard understanding of outer and inner. That Venus is this woman's drive to get into a romantic relationship. Venus is also the guy she's interested in. Venus is also the planet up there that, the beautiful blue sapphire that rises at the first canto of Purgatorio. Venus is also the Virgin Mary. It's also Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor.
But we have to remain agnostic about the question whether this is something like a living entity outside of the human beings, something on a very high level in the Dante picture, it would be the level beyond the crystal sphere, or in this crystal sphere. You don't subscribe to that picture.
Canto 4 of Paradiso. Dante has just gone past the sphere of the moon, and he's
Yes.
going to Beatrice like, what's going on here? Are these people really here?
Yes.
And Beatrice says, no. They're all they're all beyond the crystalline sphere. They're in the Imperium. But they appear here for the sake of your education. I forget exactly what the line is, but this is what your mind can conceive. So if you want to talk about ultimate reality and things like that, our minds work symbolically. Our minds, we point to the moon. We have to use our finger to point to the moon, but it's not the real moon. It's the moon that we see.
Yes.
So there's a tendency to say like free will or fate. There's a tendency to say outer or inner. I think the magic of astrology is that you can move beyond those specific categories so that we can talk about horary astrology, where it's a chart of the moment. How does that symbolize a situation? I got a horary question from somebody in Colorado. I know the person in Colorado, but I don't know the people he's talking about. But it's their situation. And somehow my job is to extract meaning from that and to give some kind of advice.
Okay, I take your book, the
You're
second
going to
book.
quote me again on
Yes,
things I've
I'm
forgotten
reading.
long ago.
I'm reading it to you.
I
Is
am
not
very pleased.
is not freedom also an alignment with the intent of the universe? It is not. Is it not a long? It is not a long jump from a meaningful to an intentional cosmos. The
Okay.
ability to divine this intent is clearly one of the attractive features in this astrological work. It borders on what you just said, but it's a little bit more spiritual than what you just said. In this quote, you are more on Dante's
Well,
side. When you just explained what you think, this Colorado thing and the Venus,
yes.
I repeat, it is not freedom also an alignment with the intent of the universe?
Okay.
Now,
Right.
did you mean that literally? Because then you can't say what you just said.
I do not mean intention in the way that you and I intend.
Okay.
Okay. And I think we're getting into some theological weeds here.
Yes, we
But
are in. This is
yes,
theology. This is
yes,
very
I
very
got it.
close to the basic problem of astrology. Is it a theological approach or is it something else?
Right.
I agree on that.
And
That is the problem.
and depending on the client and the class I'm teaching and the mood I'm in, it changes.
Oh,
And
okay.
it also develops over time.
Okay.
That you know, evolutionary astrologers will talk about evolutionary intent, which is
Uh,
sort of an
uh,
interesting idea.
with evolutionary astrology, you mean Raymond Merriman, who invented the term, right?
I have no idea who invented it.
It was Merriman. He wrote a book
Okay.
in 1997 something. Oh, no, that was the
Ah,
second edition. It was it was very early, long before
okay.
Stephen Forrest, and
Right.
he brought he wrote a book about evolutionary astrology. And now,
Okay.
what do you mean with that?
Well, I'm sort of criticizing it because it implies that there's some kind, well, sort of similar to Dante, there's some kind of divine plan. And I'm not sure astrology is able to address whether there's a divine plan.
Okay.
Where,
Now
where are
let me,
you? Where are we looking at?
I'm looking at a text I have on this special site. Okay.
Okay.
We have the term esoteric astrology in Germany, and it goes back to Thorvald Detlefsen, Rüdiger Dahlke, and Nikolaus Klein.
Oh
And
my goodness. Okay.
the thesis of Detlefsen is astrology as the teaching of primordial principles, not as the teaching of the stars or planets. Therefore, the planets can never be causes, we had that, only signs as representative for one of the 7 primordial principles, now 10, he says, as above, so below. The horoscope as the teaching and learning plan for the life of the individual. Is that the divine plan you just talked about?
Perhaps. I think there are different ways in which it's used. I couldn't help thinking that you Germans have never left Hegel in the last
That's
200
probably
years.
true. Yeah, it's probably true. So to come to your personal view, let's get rid of the computer. Come to your
Okay.
personal view, and
So
I will change the view to this. Now we see you better. Okay,
I see that.
you are a Buddhist. Is there an influence of your Buddhistic conviction to the theme we are talking about?
Yes.
Okay, elaborate.
Okay. In one of the early teachings, the Buddha's disciples asked, what is the origin of the world? Is there a God out there? What is the divine plan? Sort of from that point of view. And the Buddha said, these are questions that do not lead to, he called it edification in the translation I have, or enlightenment or progress. That for me, the important thing is not the theology, but the person I'm talking to and the people I'm teaching who will talk to people. That what matters is how I can help people live a more abundant life and solve their problems. And so what I look at is, and we talked about outer and inner earlier, people have their situations. They're thrown into their world. And the planets, the astrological chart, the transits, the solar returns, give indications about how things are unfolding over time. At the same time, every moment is every moment. And clients can do, there are various possibilities open. My job as an astrologer is to delineate what some of those possibilities are within the context of that person's life and situation. So that, and in my Dante book, and you mentioned this in an email, the whole question of consciousness and free will. And in that book, I give 2 versions of free will. One I call the intellectualist version, the other one, the voluntarist version. Now, the intellectualist version is sort of like relative free will. That, let's see, it's 2:30 in the afternoon. Maybe you'd like a cup of coffee, but maybe you better have some green tea because, you'll be up all night if you have coffee this late in the day for you. All right. And that is free will. is going from a certain point of view, a certain ideas. Aristotle talked a lot about this kind of calculation as freedom. We calculate things all the time. As an astrologer, I work with that level of free will. That level of, okay, you got this guy who sort of likes you, but you're not sure. But, you want to get into a relationship. He may not be the right person. What are you going to do about it? And you have Uranus on your Venus, so you are like ready to roll. Okay. Then there is the voluntarist, or the absolute free will. And that's more the fact that in this present moment, we do not know what we're going to do next. And this is, and Buddhist teachers will talk about when you are sitting in meditation, you are not creating karma. You're literally not doing anything. And that is Buddha nature. That is a sense of ultimate freedom. And we have in literature, especially, unfortunately, our prisons are filled with people who exercise free will because they could. Now, what usually happens is that what we tend to think is free will, when we look back, we see that there are all kinds of causes and conditions. But in the moment, you can have green tea, you can have coffee, you can decide to have a shot of whiskey because you're tired of listening to me drone on and on. That's what you do in the moment. And later, when you look back on it, you can say, that shot of whiskey was not a very good idea. I think that was my moon was conjunct Neptune at that moment, and I just wanted to escape. Now, what are you going to show me?
Now, you mentioned your book, Between Fortune and Providence, and that's why I put it up here.
It simply says hand over his. Oh, here you are. Okay.
So
I do like Cornelius's book, by the way.
Oh, you mean this one?
Read
you mean this one?
Moment of Astrology. Yeah.
Okay, we could intercept with that. Moment of Astrology is a book where basically, in short form, he says astrology is divination, right?
Yes.
What's your opinion?
Well, I agree with him as long as we don't psychologize divination.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. Actually, let's contrast with Dante.
Okay.
Dante, very, in a medieval, very mechanistic, top-down view of the universe, has strong Neoplatonic origins, where the planets, the stars, God himself is sort of directing things, and things get corrupted as we go toward the earth level. And that's a very powerful thing. But astrologers don't do that. Astrologers interpret. You could say divine in the sense of, are the gods giving us messages? Okay, maybe I don't tend to go there. But I do know that the symbols of astrology are meaningful to the lives of people because they're interpreted. I mentioned an article I sent to you, I wrote a long time ago, it turns out, that, what are the planets? The planets are these blobs that are sort of moving around the sun, and they have their orbits, and they're not doing a whole lot. And you can look at like storms on Jupiter and things like that, but, they have no direct impact in a causal way. At the same time, we are I believe the moon is in Sagittarius right now. We are having a Sagittarian conversation.
That's correct. If it's in Sagittarius.
I believe so. I believe
Okay.
so. Because
Okay.
it was in late Scorpio when I looked at a chart yesterday. So it's probably in Sagittarius.
Okay.
And so our conversation and the position of the moon are basically have a resonance with each other.
Okay.
And if you think about the moon in a physical way, that's nonsense. And astronomers will make fun of us if we talk like that. But we are having a moon in Sagittarius conversation.
Okay, let me go insert another Platonic aspect, because you rightfully said that Dante has a lot of Neoplatonic ideas in his Divina Commedia. You are familiar with the myth of air in the Politeia of Plato, I suppose. The myth of air in the end of the
But
Politeia.
of course.
And there is this, I on this channel I have this this myth of air. I have read the whole thing for everybody in German, and the people in English have to read it somewhere in a Plato
Is the
edition.
last 2 pages of the Republic.
Yes, it's the last pages of the Republic. And we don't go into the myth of air too long. The only question is, there is this attributed diamond. After the choosing has finished, you get your diamond. And we have this book of Gisela Greenbaum about the diamond in Hellenistic astrology. What is your, do you have an opinion on the diamond in this myth? Is there a diamond like that, or is it just a story, nothing relevant?
Okay. First of all, Socrates or Plato gives that story at the end, just in case people don't think that virtue is its own reward. That virtue and the happy life are the same. And Socrates goes through all kinds of things to try to convince the young men that virtue and happiness are, virtue leads to happiness. And he says, at the end, if you don't believe me, here's a story for you. So I always like to cite that. But the question of the diamond, I use it in a very practical way astrologically. People like to know who they are and what their sort of path is. And I don't like to use sun sign astrology for that, often because there are too many stereotypes, too many bad images. Instead, and I talk about this in my recent book, planets, remember I said, have their own personalities.
You mean this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Planets have their own personalities. And you have in your natal chart, most likely a planet that is strongest placed, that is most available to you. And so if I was doing a session for you, I'd say, okay, let's call it Mercury.
No, you can say Jupiter, because Jupiter is my main planet.
Oh, it's mine also. What a surprise.
Okay.
And, Jupiter has many different paths. We'd have to look at where Jupiter is, what house it's in, what sign it's in, stuff like that. But okay, your job, you may have like Sun in Pisces, but let's say you have Jupiter in Sagittarius. It's like, okay, Jupiter's in charge of stuff. Your Sun is about this, but here's a vehicle for you. And let's talk about Jupiter's great possibilities in your life as you lead it right now. So if you're like a young athlete, I would say different things.
Do you mean that the diamond is my Jupiter when you talk like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Just to make sure.
Thank you. That's what I.
Okay. I understand that. Okay. Now, this is sort of political correct what you're doing, because you are evading the problem. What is the diamond in the myth of air? What is that? You are a traditional astrologer as I am now. We use the Lord of Spirit for
Yes,
delineation with the method of
yes,
the phases coming from
yes.
Vetus Valens. But what are we doing when we are interpreting the Lord of Spirit, which is the representative of the daimon in this myth? I
No,
get
okay, all right, okay.
it sounds
Not
when you
necessarily.
okay.
Not necessarily. This is called the lot of diamond. Yes. Think of it's also reciprocal with the lot of fortune.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think of fortune and daimon as a continuity,
Okay.
not a contrast. That in our lives, as I've been saying, we've had choices to make. And fortune is sort of, well, Einstein, is the universe friendly? Okay. Is the universe not friendly? Do we have to work for every break we get? It's like that part of our lives that we have no control over. Daimon is the reciprocal. It's like, all right, what is our realm of possibility? So you could talk about the lot of daimon or the lot of spirit in terms of how we exercise free choice, what we
Okay.
do with the situation we have.
Okay.
So when I talk with clients, what I found is they easily attune to planetary symbolism. We all know what Saturn is like before we knew any astrology. So instead of going on and on about the lot of diamond in your sixth house, it's in Taurus, it's got this going on. It's like, okay, let's talk about your Mercury. Let's talk about Saturn squaring your Mercury. And what I find that, and this is true with counseling as well as with astrological consulting, is like you want to give them something they can take with them. Planets are the easiest thing to understand. And
Okay.
I would tell my classes, it's like you know this stuff already. You don't
Oh,
need me to tell you what Venus is like.
okay. So now let's go
Ah,
into your books on
a fine book. Is there a
and
special Buddhist approach?
first we go into all your books.
Oh my goodness.
I
This is
understand.
your life.
I I understand why you wrote this one.
You do
It
now.
is
Okay.
it's an introduction after you changed to traditional astrology. This is a sort of advanced book on the same topic.
Yes. Collaboration.
Why and when did you get the idea I want to write about between fortune and providence?
Okay.
Do you remember that? And when was
Oh,
that? And
well, there is there are proximate and there are distant causes. Um,
okay,
in I've always loved Dante since I read Dante in college. And for years, and later I became a Buddhist and I sort of forgot the whole thing. And after that, I became interested in astrology. And I began to read some stuff in Dane Rudyard. And I thought, oh, I see. This reminds me of stuff in Dante. Did Rudyard like crib from Dante? And I think Druidya was very good at hiding his sources because he has sources in both Dante and Ptolemy. And he poo-poos traditional astrology, but he uses it. He just doesn't. So moving along. At some point, I sort of dusted off my Divina Commedia I started getting other versions, other translations, and I began to study and then teach, especially on Paradiso.
Okay.
And because Paradiso contains the spheres of the planets in a very medieval hierarchical kind of way, but
Dionysius
is
Areopagita way.
I'm sorry?
In the way of Dionysius Areopagita described the hierarchies.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
But also his sense of the planets seemed to be very, very complete and very evocative. And the symbolism he uses, let's say, Jupiter is this grand ensemble, and you get the sphere of Saturn, and people are very stern, and Beatrice doesn't smile, and all that stuff. It's like it was dramatic, and it was right in your face. And then in 2008, if you recall, we had a financial collapse.
Yes.
And I only write books when there's a world problem. And my clients went away, many of them. And so this was my time to begin writing this. And the title came to me midway because we have the idea of sort of the Wheel of Fortune and the spontaneous and accidental nature of fortune.
When you
But we
say
also
fortune, do you mean fate?
not necessarily.
Okay.
Here's the trick. Here's the trick. Fortune is very prominent in our lives. I mean, we turn on the news, we see a lot of ups and downs of life, especially these days, the downs. We go to the doctors, we have a good bill of health, or they send us to a bunch of specialists because they're concerned about something. Our partner decides to stay with us forever or to leave us. Those are like fortunate. They seem to happen haphazardly. Providence is the model of an ordered universe where everything makes sense. And in Dante's view, it's because God's at the top and his angels are sort of directing things. And so in Dante's case, he's exiled from Florence and things are terrible are happening to him. And then when he gets into paradise and he talks with his ancestor who says, no, this is what's supposed to happen. And this is how you're going to work with it. That's providence.
Do you have the feeling that Dante is following Proclus, who makes a difference between fate and providence, whereas providence is the higher thing and fate is subordinated to providence? Do you think Dante thinks the same way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you were writing this book, did you come about the story of Boccaccio, who wrote a biography of Dante?
I've not seen that book.
Okay.
I've not seen it. It's been referred to in my sources, but I've never seen it directly.
So you haven't read Boccaccio, but you have an opinion on Beatrice, whether she was a real person in the life of Dante, right?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Well, there is 700 pages doubt.
All right. First of all, there is a Beatrice as a human being, and there's the Beatrice in Dante's very, very fertile imagination.
Yes, and now I come to this Arthur Schuld thing. The thing is, first of all, for the viewers, there's a movie on Amazon Prime about Botticelli's Inferno, and you can find the drawings. There's a book on Amazon, but you can find the drawings if you follow this link.
Okay, all right.
And there you have.
Who's the artist?
Botticelli.
Oh, of course.
This picture is
Of course,
Botticelli's.
yeah, Botticelli. Right,
Yeah,
right.
and
Yeah.
Arthur Schult title is Dante's Divina Commedia as an evidence for a temple knight's esoterical initiation. There's a book, and now let me get this straight. The theory of Schult is Dante was a member of the Fideli Amore, as Boccaccio was. And that is a sort of lay order community in the context of the Temple Knights.
You know when he joined that? Was that during his exile?
No, that was beforehand. The first
Okay, all right.
initiation, according to Schult,
Okay.
the first book of Dante, I always forget this, something with Nuova Life or something.
Yeah, Vita Nuova. Yeah.
Right, that one. That is a description of his first initiation in the lower grade of the order.
Ah, okay.
And
All right. All right.
the Divina Commedia is the final initiation in this context. And the interesting thing is, Dante was in Paris in 1307 when the Temple Knights were flattened, with the king's order. And the idea of Schult is Beatrice is not the physical person in Florence. Beatrice is the Pistis Sophia, has nothing to do with a living being, and he is not glorifying this person, but he uses the name Beatrice in, I think it's this thing. You have the color red and white of Beatrice. Yep. You have the color red and white in Wolfram of Eschenbach's Parzival.
Ah.
The Temple Knights have the red cross on the white linen for moon and sun, soul and spirit, love mystic of Fidelis Amore. The Holy Great Knights conjure Amor in Parzival. Beatrice for Dante is Pistis Sophia, the love of the Holy Spirit, an initiation into the secrets of the esoteric gnosis of the Cathars. On their path of initiation, the faithful of love, Fedeli d'Amore, distinguished 4 levels of initiation according to the 4 elemental qualities of earth, water, air, and fire, or 7 degrees of initiation according to the 7 planetary spheres. And Boccaccio was a member and guarding the secrets of the order, and that's the cause of his deception with the Bice Portinari legend. Okay. What do you think of that?
I have 2 thoughts. The first thought is it's making me want to relearn my high school and college German. So I can read this book.
It's unfortunately not translated into English.
That's fine. That's why I want to relearn my German. But secondly, in the Christian view, remember, Christ was both an individual human being and godly merged together. And Beatrice, and I don't disavow the tie with the Templars and all that. That may be part of it. Absolutely. But at the same time, this was a real human being. And the pivot is in the upper cantos of Purgatorio, where Beatrice shows up to guide Dante along, and Dante can't find Virgil, and Beatrice says, don't weep for Virgil. I'm going to make you suffer some more. And they go through this whole like personal relationship thing. And he eventually like faints and is dragged across Lethe and all that. But there's a real transition here between Beatrice as this adult crush that Dante had from afar, And it's pretty obvious that, they were in the same neighborhood if this is the right person. And this sort of symbolic lady of wisdom that accompanies him through paradise, up to paradise, and is sort of his basic reference point for wisdom. And then she takes her seat in the upper reaches of paradise, fairly, I think the third row seats from God, that sort of thing. And so what Dante does and what Christian wisdom does is, okay, you have this individual person, but you also have the divine, and they are merged. Okay. So in that way, the paradigm, or the best paradigm for Beatrice was actually the Christian view of Jesus.
Okay. I let it stand there because we cannot discuss 700 pages in a 1-hour video. That wouldn't make sense. Let me come to your last book. I got it just yesterday, so I haven't read it yet. What, when and where and why this 4th book, and what for?
Volker, it's my pandemic book. Okay. When you get to it, I actually talk about in the first few pages that I'm interested, and it's actually quite relevant to our discussion, because how do we apply the symbols of the planets to real people in their real lives? And so I decided to go through, and I've heard it said that the basic books are the most difficult to write, and I found this difficult to write. What I do is I take some fundamental meanings of all the planets, I apply them to modern life, to some modern psychology, to literature and characters, and to people's charts. And I talk about that in terms of planetary virtues and what we have already here that we can augment, that we can do better. I think you'll find it an interesting read. And what I try to do is, I use many examples from astrological profiles that I wrote during the years in which Donald Trump was president and I needed to cheer up. So I have, Hannah Arendt is one of my exemplars that I use in the book. I also use Shostakovich, if you know the Russians, as well as a lot of Americans who were advocates of civil rights in different ways. But it's meant to be interesting for a newcomer to astrology, as well as to people who are more advanced. I think once you start reading it, you're going to want to talk to me again.
Okay, we can do that. So
I have a funny feeling.
So what I want to do, our viewers, is what I didn't mention before. On this site, there is a lot of information, and there's videos, and there is writings. Not all of the writings of Joseph are there because I was missing an article from old, but there is a lot of articles. So if the people watching this video want to know more about Joseph's approach, this is the site to go. And my last question to you, I can't miss the. Yes. I have to say about the copyright. I have the right to publish this interview uncut and unedited, and Joseph has the right to do with it whatever he likes to do with it. So that about the copyright.
I never alter anything, so enjoy yourself.
Well, you can. That's your right, because that's what I just
Thank you.
declared.
Thank you.
So my final question, what did I miss to ask you about your life, about your work? What should I ask you as a final question, or did we cover everything you wanted to be covered today?
That sounds like something that's exactly how I end astrology sessions with clients. What
Okay.
haven't we talked about?
Yeah, what haven't we talked about?
I'm thinking. I think I got to, as my clients often say, we've been pretty wide ranging. I think I've gotten to most of it.
Did this video represent your view of free will in astrology correctly?
Yes, because I needed to make the distinction between the relative and the non-relative free will, the intellectual and the voluntarist.
Yes, yes.
And where astrology fits in, the voluntarist is more spiritual, you could say.
When you look at the American astrological scene from East Coast to West Coast and in between, are you a special nerd with this approach, or is this mainstream in America? If you, for example, if you look at the United Astrology Conference and the 6,000 people, how many of your kind would you meet there?
Few of, not that many of, well, I honestly, Volker, I'm not entirely sure. I tend to think of myself as sort of like Nietzsche, as untimely, and that in the future I will be more influential than I am in the present. That helps keep me going.
Okay. You have a famous example for that, because you were probably the first in book form talking about traditional whole sign houses in 2001,
Exactly.
and now it's mainstream.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
It's like I've been looking at I work at I teach at Kepler College, and I noticed that a lot of students use whole sign houses. It's like, wait a minute, I started that.
Yes, you did.
And that's really strange.
Coming to your activity in Kepler College, I did a long video with Lee Lehman about the Kepler College time when it was accredited. How is Kepler College today? What is Kepler College today? How do they work, and how do you work in Kepler College?
Good questions. It's actually done a very good job being available to different kinds of people interested in astrology. They have a diploma program. And I teach one course in the diploma program, and it's pretty intensive, and you're expected to do a lot of work and to be able to be a professional astrologer.
How long? 3 years?
2 or 3 years, I forget exactly.
Oh, okay.
On the other hand, they have webinars, they have guest teachers. They've made themselves available to people who have more of a passing interest or not sure what they want to do. And I've done a lot of teachings of their quote electives.
Okay.
And which has a variety of topics of sometimes predictive, sometimes spiritual, sometimes psychological. And so I think they've done a really good job attracting different kinds of people. And so you start with a couple, they say, I could do this professionally. You get into the diploma program for that. So I think over the years, they've done a really good job sort of going from the college model toward a more vocational model with, it's open-ended.
Yeah. Do they still have the habit? It was a long distance course when it started in 2000 with the accredited form, but the students could come once in a semester to Seattle. Is that still the case?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, okay. So it's only a long distance course.
It's only online, which means there are many people I consider friends who I've never actually been in the same room with.
Oh, okay. Okay, coming back to my question, did we miss something
Yes.
important?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, so I thank you,
I
Joseph
thank
Crane,
you.
and I thank the viewers for stopping by, and I stop the recording. Bye-bye.